The story opens with a writer named Alice. She is a well-known novelist, but a traumatic experience with her lover a few years ago has left a deep impact on her mind. Since then, she gets startled by the smallest things. Now, with the deadline for her new book approaching, her mind is utterly restless. To make matters worse, her ex-boyfriend is about to be released from jail, which has made her even more anxious. To escape this and focus on her work, Alice decides to leave the city and head to a remote village, where she plans to stay alone in an old mansion for a few days. Her friend Rebecca drops her off at the mansion, but Alice insists on being alone, so Rebecca leaves. As Alice settles her belongings and sits down to work, a strange incident occurs. The moment she turns off the light, she catches a glimpse of a shadowy figure in the mirror. She was working alone on her computer, but the eerie silence and desolate atmosphere make her uneasy. She doesn't even realize when she falls asleep. In her sleep, she has a strange and terrifying dream. The dream is blurry, and out of fear, she jolts awake. At that moment, she notices a faint glimpse of someone moving in the room, and from somewhere far off, she hears the sound of someone crying, as if fear is emanating from every corner of the mansion. Despite her fear, Alice follows the sound and notices wet footprints on the floor. The footprints are strange, not quite human, as if they belong to something else. Following the trail, she reaches the upper floor, where the footprints end outside her room. She enters and finds an old suitcase. Upon opening it, she discovers a striking red dress inside. As she examines the dress, another box falls to the floor, spilling out several old videotapes. Out of curiosity, Alice picks up one of the tapes, which is labeled Lucy and David's Memories. At that moment, a cold gust of wind brushes past her, making her shiver. In a hurry, she gathers the tapes and heads downstairs. Then, she plays one of the tapes, which shows glimpses of Lucy and David's happy life. David was always recording every moment he spent with his wife. Watching these moments, Alice becomes emotional and gets lost in memories of her own past relationship. As she composes herself and decides to go to bed, she hears the sound of a woman crying again. She gets up and goes outside, noticing something strange playing on her computer screen. Thinking it might be a virus, she heads downstairs and sees a woman playing the piano. But as she gets closer, the woman stops, and what happens next is truly terrifying. Alice now realizes that this mansion is not just deserted, there's something strange here. Trembling with fear, she immediately picks up her phone and calls Rebecca. Fortunately, Rebecca is still awake. In a panic, Alice tells her everything, but Rebecca dismisses it as a result of stress and mental exhaustion. She advises Alice to take her medication, rest, and finish her script. Alice was deeply shaken. She now realized that no one would help her. She had to uncover the truth herself. She pulled out the old videotapes again and started watching to understand what had happened between Lucy and David. In the beginning, they were very happy, with David capturing every moment on camera. But gradually, David's behavior changed. He became suspicious and possessive, convinced that Lucy was involved with someone else. He began restricting her freedom, questioning her every move and demanding constant updates. Lucy started to break under this pressure, and their relationship was reduced to arguments and silence. Watching this, Alice fell into deep thought. Suddenly, her phone rang, snapping her out of her reverie. When she answered, there was no response, just the sound of a woman sobbing. It didn't take long for Alice to realize it could be Lucy. Terrified, she hung up. Then, she felt as though someone was standing behind her, staring at her. Too scared to continue watching the tapes, she went to bed, but as soon as she closed her eyes, flashes of Lucy and David swirled in her mind, leaving her restless. Finally, she gathered her courage and played another tape. What she saw this time was even more shocking. Lucy was fed up with David's controlling behavior and wanted to leave the house. But David, suspecting she was planning to run away with someone else, began stalking her. The tape abruptly stopped there. Alice immediately searched for the next tape, but it was incomplete. The reel inside had been removed. It was now clear to Alice that the strange occurrences in the mansion were part of an unfinished story. Perhaps Lucy's spirit still sought justice, and her pain and anger were the cause of these events. Alice resolved to help Lucy. She put on the same red dress and old necklace she had seen Lucy wearing in the tapes. As soon as she did, she saw a face in the mirror, Lucy's. Lucy could now speak. She told Alice everything, how her husband had doubted her, forced her to have an abortion, and then murdered her. Alice was stunned, as she had experienced something similar in her own life. To confirm this, Alice called Rebecca and asked her to find information about David and Lucy. Soon, Rebecca called back with news that shook Alice to her core. David and Lucy had mysteriously disappeared years ago. The investigation report revealed that David suffered from severe depression. His condition had deteriorated so much that he had attempted suicide. Eventually, Lucy brought him to his ancestral village, the same old mansion where Alice was now staying. After that, both vanished without a trace. As Alice hung up the phone, the door behind her creaked open on its own, as if someone was calling her inside. Despite her fear, Alice mustered her courage and entered. Moments later, she found an old camera in the room, the same one David used. Inside was the final videotape, which had been missing until now. As Alice played the tape, her heart sank. The camera showed David muttering to himself, consumed by suspicion that Lucy had betrayed him and that the child she was carrying wasn't his. In a fit of rage and depression, he lost control and drowned Lucy in the bathtub. When he came to his senses, he realized his mistake, but it was too late. He buried Lucy's body behind the mansion and, in the same house, hanged himself. Alice couldn't bear to watch any longer and shut down the computer. She was deeply saddened by the cruelty inflicted on Lucy, as something similar had happened in her own life. She couldn't understand why Lucy's spirit was still wandering. Perhaps Lucy didn't know that the man who ruined her life was no longer in this world. With this thought, Alice went to the back of the mansion where Lucy had been buried. Just as she was about to speak, her phone rang. It was her ex-boyfriend, Ben. Alice was about to hang up when he suddenly began apologizing, expressing regret for his actions while in jail. But before he could say more, Alice noticed a shadowy figure moving inside the house. She asked if he was inside, but Ben clearly denied it, saying he would no longer trouble her and that everything was his fault. As the call ended, Alice felt a slight relief, but the truth was yet to be unveiled. When she returned, she saw that her computer had turned on by itself, playing the same video that had been left incomplete. What she saw next shook her to her core. David hadn't died that day. His mother arrived just in time and saved him. She lied to the police, claiming both had disappeared, and hid David in the mansion. David was still in the mansion, and due to his deteriorating mental state, he mistook Alice for Lucy. Terrified, Alice ran upstairs and immediately called Rebecca, telling her the information she gave her last week was wrong and David is still alive, and is in the mansion. But Rebecca refused that she hadn't spoken to Alice last week and had never even heard of the David Alice was talking about. Alice was utterly confused. Suddenly, David appeared in front of her. Without a word, he grabbed Alice's hand and dragged her toward the bathroom. Alice tried desperately to free herself, but David's strength overpowered her. As they reached the bathroom, Alice was horrified to see the bathtub already filled with water. Without wasting a moment, David tried to drown her, as if he wanted to end her forever. Just then, a woman's voice echoed through the room. David turned to look and saw Lucy standing there, the same Lucy who was supposed to be dead. David was gripped by terror and tried to flee, but in the next moment, Lucy appeared before his eyes, and in an instant, David met his end. It was the final act of vengeance. With David's death, the negative energy that had plagued the mansion for years seemed to dissipate. Lucy drained the water from the bathtub and silently vanished. Alice's life was spared. Some time later, Rebecca arrived and pulled Alice out of the bathroom. Though Alice survived, the incident reopened her old wounds, and her mental stability began to waver. Rebecca struggled to give her medication and urged her to rest. With a broken heart, Alice recounted the entire story to Rebecca, who was left speechless. That night, while Alice was in a deep sleep, Rebecca's gaze fell on a diary lying near her bed. Out of curiosity, she began reading it. Inside was written the same story Alice had told her about Lucy, David, and the mansion. Rebecca was now filled with doubt. She immediately went downstairs to uncover the truth, but there was no sign of David's body or any trace of Lucy. All she found was an old camera with a recording still running. In it, there was only Alice, talking to herself, alone. There was no David, no Lucy, just Alice and her loneliness. In the camera, Alice kept repeating the same dialogue, "When you sleep, an angel is near you." It was the same line she had written in her diary as if it were David's dialogue. Now, Rebecca understood the whole situation. In reality, Alice had internalized the pain of her past and her broken relationships so deeply that she had created an entirely new world in her mind. In this world, characters like David and Lucy were merely reflections of herself. Her past, her pain, everything had become part of a mental illusion. David was the embodiment of the person who had broken her heart, and Lucy represented the emotions that continued to haunt her even after death. In the end, this story became one of Alice's inner struggle and her ultimate triumph over it. She channeled this entire experience into a novel, and with that, the movie ends.